My name is Justice. I represent the OC Justice Initiative. I am here with our fellows who have organized the Stop the Hate seminar with us. They're going to be asking a few questions. So for the first individual to my right, I met this individual last year or a year or two, and they've been working in the Orange County community for several years, empowering our BIPOC youth and also BIPOC communities, whether it be through immigration rights, whether it be through Black lives, whether it be through just any type of injustice in Orange County. This individual represents the organization OCCORD. OCCORD has been doing work in the Orange County community for years. They're an activist, organizer, and a proud mom. Please welcome Asha to the stage from OCCORD. The next guest we have today has traveled from far, far away to be here with us. This individual represents the most esteemed civil rights organization in this nation, the National Urban League. They have been around for over 100 years doing the work. Huge milestones for Black and brown folk would have not have been organized or completed without this organization. Mr. Ray Shackelford from the National Urban League. The next individual that we have with us today represents an organization known as the Know Your Rights Camp, which provides free second autopsies for victims and families who have lost loved ones due to an in-custody death, including police-related deaths. Ms. Nicole Martin is an attorney and the legal program director for the Know Your Rights Camp Autopsy Initiative. Nicole was the first employee of the Autopsy Initiative and was tasked with working alongside Know Your Rights Camp to develop the Autopsy Initiative. Nicole received her JD from Sandra Day O'Connor College of Law and her Master's of Law in Intellectual Property from American University, Washington College of Law. Nicole has demonstrated interest in social justice for her years of work and public service. Next we have Ms. Griselda Garcia, who's the program manager for the Know Your Rights Camp Autopsy Initiative, where she manages case intake, facilitates communication between families and the forensic pathologists, and ensures that the completion of second autopsies. She has dedicated her life to guiding families through the intricate process with compassion and precision. With over 7 years of nonprofit experience, background as a paralegal, and work with those formerly incarcerated and experiencing homelessness, she brings a wealth of expertise to her role. Griselda earned her Bachelor of Arts in Kiana and Chicano Studies and a paralegal certificate from the University of California, Los Angeles Extension. Please make some noise for Ms. Griselda Garcia. Thank you so much for being here. Kiana is an operations manager at the Know Your Rights Camp Autopsy Initiative. She received her BA in sociology and went on to work in healthcare following completing college. Her time in healthcare helped her understand the importance of representation and advocacy in the industry, which led her to her role now at the Know Your Rights Camp Autopsy Initiative. And then we have Miss Manya Chandra. She is a junior at Chapman University, fellow resident advisor. She is on the student government board as well. She's also a leadership positions in many clubs that I'm forgetting on campus. But she is one of our fellows of our fellowship and our scholarship program, and we're really honored to have Manya here with us today. So thank you, Manya. And then we have Ajane, Miss Ajane King. Ajane has been doing a lot of work for being only a freshman. She has worked in several different positions outside of campus. Also, she was part of the United Nations Peace Ambassador Program, doing really great work. And this is all before her first year of college. We designed these questions today because we feel as though these organizations align with the advocacy work that we're doing in our communities as well. Each and every one of you to this movement. First question, I want to give it to Miss Asha. How do you engage and empower youth within your organization or as an individual in your advocacy efforts?
In our organization, one of the things that we have been working on is increasing our outreach to youth and young people. That's been one of the things we honestly have been struggling with. Most recently, I feel like there's been a generational divide, but we have been switching up our tactics and we are supporting youth with the current immigration climate, and there is a youth-led march tomorrow in Anaheim. That, and then we have a leadership academy coming up in the summertime to engage more youth and young people starting at age 16 and above. Just like, everybody can make change. So we just want to make sure that we're able to create the space for folks to be able to use their voice.
So when we're talking about 16 to 29, first it would be our high school age kids or project ready students. So we have more than 92 urban leagues across the country. And my division is called Equitable Justice Strategic Initiatives. We're responsible for supporting those urban leagues across the country when it comes to state and local advocacy. Some of the things that we cover includes restorative justice, criminal justice reform, police accountability, gun violence, hate-fueled violence, extremism, expungement, environmental justice, and many more, but those are just the things that are top of mind. And so with Project Ready, that's going to be more focused around mentorship, career, college readiness. More recently, we have started to look at youth civics. So we're actually in the process of developing a program that will be rolled out more broadly. But we already have urban leagues in certain cities that are doing youth civic engagement, teaching them. I used to help the Houston affiliate to do it. I also know that we have our affiliate in Louisville, Kentucky is also doing some work around it, and many others. And once you get to college, right now the primary program we have on college campuses is called BEAT, the Black Executive Exchange Program, and that, or Business Executive Exchange Program, it used to be called the Black Executive Exchange Program. But they just revamped it, and so we're on certain college campuses where we're focusing on professional career development, partnering with those colleges and different sponsors. So for example, last year we went to North Carolina A&T, and one of the major partners there was Toyota. And there's a lot of those different partnerships. Like I said, that was more STEM focused. It just depends on where the affiliate is, where the college campus is, and that kind of shapes what it looks like. We were also talking about Atlanta, so the AU Center. I went to Morehouse, there's partnerships there, Spelman, Clark Atlanta University, the list goes on. And then you have our young professionals, which is ages 21 to 40. So part of that group would fall under that. And within that group, it is some of everything. You have access to training from a civic perspective, professional development, mentorship. They are actually given leadership roles within our organization. Some of the young professionals actually serve on urban league boards. So I actually got the opportunity to serve on a board when I was the local president of a YP chapter, and also got an opportunity to be a trustee at the national level when I was the national president for the Young Professional Organization. So depending on how involved you are, how far you climb, there's a lot of opportunity, and so we lean into empowering the youth in a lot of ways, just because one, obviously you have to make that investment, but two, our urban leagues, like a lot of nonprofits, have limited bandwidth, and so we depend a lot on our volunteers, our young people, and it's a way for them to get developed. That's honestly how I got to where I am. I started actually when I was like 16 years old in the urban league, and now I'm a vice president out of the national office.
So as mentioned, we are with Know Your Rights Camp, and our mission of Know Your Rights Camp is to advance the liberation and well-being of Black and Brown communities. So Know Your Rights Camp does have a large focus on pouring into the youth. We do have a lot of Know Your Rights Camp seminars, and within those seminars we're teaching very critical skills. They're learning about their legal rights from the federal side and from the state and local level. They're learning about financial literacy. They're learning about their history, art, mental health, physical health. And so we're able to contribute and assist on the legal end side. As I'm an attorney, we know the importance of understanding our legal rights, especially when interacting with police. And so we have different kind of hypothetical situations that I'll kind of let Griselda explain, as she's often volunteered during that portion as well.
So we have hypotheticals where we welcome the kids who are in our seminars to engage, and it's also an opportunity for them to realize that they do know their rights, or at least kind of venture out and acknowledge that they do have rights. And then another part of the empowerment of the day is like just acknowledging that there's opportunity for resources and like networking, because you have a wide span of like different volunteers that engage with the kids that come for the day, because it's on a weekend. So they get to kind of have a day outside of school to get resources, but also engage with the people that are coming in, because we have a wide span of different people that do different types of jobs. So it's a good opportunity for networking as well.
Most of you do work that involves the youth, especially Black and brown youth. And we at OCJI, we center our work with BIPOC youth, because we believe that we are the majority, not the minority. And if we come together and we show the next generation that collective organization is a conduit toward liberation, then we know that Black and brown youth is in good hands. So it's really humbling to hear that each and every one of you, started young in doing this organizing work and understand the importance of continuing to pass that on to other generations. How do you advocate with specific policy changes in this nation, and how do you, I would say, prioritize your communities in that organizing with different types of policy changes?
We are a grassroots organ. We focus predominantly on our local community. One of the biggest policy initiatives that we were working on was last year was affordable housing in California. And just making sure that there was rent control for folks in Anaheim and Santa Ana, that there wasn't predatory landlords, and currently, another initiative that we are working on is an initiative called Democracy Dollars, so that the local community gets a stipend to support their local candidate to run for office, because is a roadblock for a lot of folks that would like to run for office, is the fact that they don't have financial backing for their political campaign. So we'll be able to, with the Democracy Dollars campaign, it would give residents the ability to put their voucher towards a candidate so that they're able to fund their campaign.
For us, it's layered. You have my colleagues in what we call the National Urban Washington Bureau. They're based in DC. They focus on the federal legislation. So there's been a couple of bills we've been pushing that have not moved, like the John Lewis Voting Right Act, the Freedom to Vote Act, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, just to name a few. And honestly, right now, at the federal level, we're primarily playing defense. A lot of that right now is centralized or focused on DEI policy. We actually have some active lawsuits going on right now as it relates to that, in terms of trying to protect the communities that we serve. You then have to look at it from the state and local perspective. Our division primarily is going to focus on things that are restorative in nature, again, tied to police accountability, gun violence. Right now, we're really leaning heavily into the Clean Slate Initiative. So we have a partnership with that organization. Their CEO, Sheena, her and our CEO, President Morial, work well together. And so within our organization, we're really focused on record clearance just because of the impact that has to somebody. And honestly, it's just not fair. It's fungible, because somebody has paid their debt to society, they've served their time, whatever financial obligations, restitution, etc. But then they have to continue to check this box, and it prevents them from being able to get housing, access to jobs, education, And so you really leave them with no options, and then they commit what's called survival crimes, and then the cycle of recidivism just starts all over again. So we're leaning very heavily right now into clean slate. We also have certain pieces of legislation that are modeled after things that are at the federal level. But those, like I said, the DEI, trying to protect our communities, and then the clean slate, more so at the state and local level, are probably the two things that I'd say are like at the forefront right now.
They're also going to be cutting a lot of, DEI programs. I know the NAACP, I was speaking with some individuals, and they're going to be fighting back against the DEI programs, but, what we, are advocating for at OCJI is more so legislation that we see that could benefit BIPOC youth, right? For example, I think on the same line, Mr. Shackelford, of what you are all advocating for at the National Urban League, we at OCJI co-sponsored a bill called ACA 8, and that was one of the first bills in California that would have abolished slavery and voluntary servitude. Unfortunately, with our advocacy and some other organizations, it didn't pass. It had passed by 10%, when we were extremely surprised, considering California as a liberal state, and it did not pass. But we at OCJI know that not only does that show that the youth may not be educated about, policy, but it also shows that this nation is not ready for change. Just like we advocated for reparations this past year. And the California legislature actually, let me be specific, the Black caucus of the California legislature did not pass it. And there was a lot of work being done behind the scenes to make sure that legislatures who were Black and brown got to really put forth their opinions on reparations.
So I know that OCCORD, National Urban League, New York's Camp, part of you guys' organization's objectives and goals is to create unity and collaboration among different diverse groups. Hence, I want to know what strategies have you guys found most effective in building coalitions across different community groups?
Because we're providing services nationwide, we do our Know Your Rights camps in different cities across the country. We provide our autopsy services nationwide too. I think that because our reach expands so far, it emphasizes the importance of having partnerships and collaborations, because we can't do this work alone. So we spend a lot of time trying to partner with other organizations that are aligned with our mission. We have partnered with the National Police Accountability Project. The opportunities that we have to be able to speak in person, for us people to learn about our mission and spread the awareness are critical. And I think that when we're providing social justice services, it's just as important for people to also know the people behind the organization as well. So I think that it's partnering with other people who value our mission and who we see alignment within their mission, because that we know that there's a lot of organizations doing amazing work, and that more impactful work can be done when we come together. And I think that it's also always being willing to learn. I think specifically with the autopsy initiative, there is no other program doing what we're doing, providing these free autopsies for this specific issue of in-custody deaths. And with that new program, you have to always be willing to learn. And so I think the more different types of people we can learn with, whether that's from the attorneys themselves, whether that's from our community directly, the family members that we're serving, forensic pathologists as well.
From the autopsy side, something that's been very, I would say, helpful and has made the biggest difference is the partnerships with the funeral homes and the pathologists. And it's a lot of word of mouth and making sure that we can establish great rapport and building out this program, and also making sure that, because we serve families nationwide, so there's no state that we aren't able to assist and get to. So having partnerships with those funeral homes, funeral directors, and even the small businesses, from transportations for any funeral homes that may not be able to assist with transport, those are all really huge because you never know when or where a family might need our assistance.
What strategies have you found most effective in building coalitions across different community groups?
I think one, having a clear vision of what the partnership is going to look like, or the collaboration. Like, what are we actually focused on? What is the role that everybody's going to play? You know, even if there's one lead organization, everybody needs to have some type of skin in the game, for lack of a better term. I think you also have to come in with an open mind. I was actually having this conversation on another panel about collaboration in conjunction with ADL on Monday. They were the lead organization, but part of that was discussing assuming good intent. Because when you have, you know, different groups of people, different ideologies, thought processes, different perspectives, you know, everybody's not gonna always agree. But if you have a North Star that kind of helps to guide things, and the way I approach it is, you know, if I don't agree with you, is this something that's ultimately best for what we're trying to accomplish, or is this something more about my ego and being able to separate the two? Those are just some of the things that come top of mind when it comes to collaboration. I think that the last thing I mentioned is that you have to be willing to see things sometimes. You can't always be the one that's out front or leading it. It may be this organization this time, or maybe the next time it's you. And I think those types of things I've found in my experience make collaboration and partnership that much better.
In grassroots work, there's no power without people, so we have to work together, period. And a lot of times, every org has their own focus, but the goal is to look at the intersections, the intersectionality of what everybody is working on to reach the North Star. And that's the same thing. It's roles, it's clear communication, there's forgiveness.
Yes.
And yeah, just communication and roles. Because sometimes if you don't give somebody something to do, they're not gonna do it.
So I want to commend each of you guys' organizations for collaborating and wanting to work together to create a more impactful contribution. Lastly, for me, I want to know, how do you guys measure the impact of your advocacy work?
I think we measure for the autopsy initiative specifically, we measure impact through the way the families receive the service of the second autopsy. Part of our service is also having an opportunity for them to have a discussion with the forensic pathologist who performed the second autopsy on their loved one. Every time I've provided them with like the date of that discussion call, they're very grateful, and even after the call, they're very grateful to even have an opportunity to understand what were the kind of the findings of the forensic pathologist. So I would say we measure impact on like their response. We say this in our organization, grief comes in waves. So for the families, being able to have at least some type of I wouldn't say answer, but at least some acknowledgement that there is another set of eyes looking into their loved one's death. They feel grateful, and I think that is the impact that we want to receive. And of course, also when another part of our service is after they've provided the medical examiner's report to the forensic pathologist, the forensic pathologist will review their findings and then the report from the medical examiners and create their final autopsy report. And then we'll have another discussion call with the families. And this type of service, it's unknown to a lot of people. So for them to be able to, again, get answers, the impact is on how they receive the information. And we've seen a lot of parents, siblings, kids kind of go through the grieving process and finally saying, I'm going to let go and let my loved one rest because now I've got some type of information.
We have these citizenship fairs that we put on throughout the year, and when the people that we have worked with get their citizenship, they come back and they share their story, what their process was and everything, and that's a win. It's a win for everybody because it finally happened. And then we do have quantitative data that is on our website, www.OCCORD.org. And we have a few different research studies. So, but we're about to launch a listening project. We're about to launch a listening project. The community safety right now during this time, interactions with the police, their neighbors, what they need to feel safe.
One, it's very difficult, in my experience, to measure advocacy because it's not always linear. We can say we're going to get this legislation passed, but I think we all know it's not that simple. We wish it was, but it doesn't work like that. And so with that, you have the quantitative pieces, whether it's, how many people did we actually organize around this? How many state legislatures did we show up to? Or how many members of Congress did we speak to? Sometimes, if it's on the defense, is this a bill we were actually able to stop that we know would have been extremely harmful? That's a win. Sometimes it may be looking at maybe we didn't get to the final goal of what the legislation, but some version of it ultimately got passed. And so how much were we able to influence, which again, that's difficult to capture. So some of it is going to be anecdotal. How many people did you train that are now a part of this advocacy work? We see our little ones over here. They may be future freedom fighters. We don't know. But just from them being in these spaces, how many people have you heard talk about, I used to go to these things with my mom and my dad, and I didn't know what I was in, and then, so, we don't know. So some of these things are very, short term, you can realize them very quickly. Other things translate much further down the road, because, even with me, my parents had me involved in stuff. I didn't expect to be a leader in a civil rights organization. If I told you that, I'd be lying. But clearly I'm here, so there's a lot of ways we measure it, but the goal ultimately is to get wins and to get meaningful legislation that is transformative to the conditions that people are experiencing on the ground.
But I wanted to follow up with Asha real quick. I know there's been a huge influx of ICE agents in the community, Santana, and also in Anaheim. Are you all tracking that data about how many individuals have been wrongly arrested and individuals who have been persecuted by ICE right now?
I don't have that data. I don't.
Yeah.
But we do have the Orange County Immigration Coalition.
Right. This work is not linear, so it's hard to measure the impact. But, I think you're very, very humble for the work you all do at the National Urban League for over 100 years. I know there's some accomplishments that you could, educate our audience with. Because to be honest, when I was telling them we had the National Urban League, a lot of young folk had no idea what the heck I was talking about. And I said, you don't know the National Urban League? They said, no.
The Urban League has been around, we make 115 years this September. The oldest civil rights organization is the NAACP. They were founded in 1909, we were in 1910. And when you look at historic legislation that we've been a part of, you have the Civil Rights Act, you have the Voting Rights Act, the Fair Housing Act, many of the things that they are attempting to tear down right now in real time our leadership was a part of, whether it was CEOs like Whitney Young, Vernon Jordan. These are historical giants that if you don't know who they are, you should be looking them up. If you've heard of the Big Six that met with Lyndon Johnson, Whitney Young was there with Dr. King, Roy Wilkins, John Lewis, those other freedom fighters and civil rights leaders. We've always been present at the table as it relates to those conversations. We have also, even from a local perspective, more recently fought things that were impacting communities related to environmental justice. When you look at bills that help to stop things like concrete batch plants being placed in Black and brown communities. It's not that they don't understand, they consistently place profit over people. And so we could literally spend all day going over the history. I don't even know all of it, I know a lot of it. But we would not be as far along as we are today without legacy institutions like the National Urban League, like the NAACP, and many others. And so I'm grateful to be a part of that legacy. And unfortunately, we still have a lot of work to continue to do and fight, because even going back to local, 23, I had to testify in federal court as a part of a lawsuit against the state of Texas concerning voting rights. And my father, who's an attorney, did a lawsuit 30 years prior to that. And so you're talking about things with his own son in the same, lifetime fighting the same things. It doesn't make sense. So we can't take these moments for granted, the freedoms, the things we've been afforded. And I think all of us collectively, not individuals obviously been doing the work, but collectively we have relaxed. And so my hope is that we ultimately change the culture where people understand that civic engagement has to be a part of your daily life, just like eat, exercise, whatever those rituals are for you. But we have to be consistent in that way.
We measure our work by, empowering these young queens right here, and going to different types of colleges and seeing how we could, empower these student leaders to be more confident in who they are and what they represent and their indigenous roots and their identities, and also each year when we host these different demonstrations, seeing how many organizations we can come together, we really take pride in, because our demographic is the next generation of BIPOC youth leaders, and if we could continue to reach out and grow our reach, where we're not just regional anymore, we're national, I think that's a direction in which we're very proud of. And I would say in the last 4 years, I think we've done that, and now we're coming back to Orange County to extend that hand to any other organization or youth leader who needs that help. So I think we're all on the right path on how we can measure our impact.
I want to say, firstly, thank you so much for making the time and effort to be here. I think it's so incredibly important, more now than ever, to highlight the work you've done, to remind ourselves just how far we've gotten, but also how far we need to get, and to protect the work that has been made so far. That being said, we would love for you guys to shed some light on the challenges you've faced as you focus on reform and how you've overcome them.
When we think about structural changes that need to occur, there's so many challenges to overcome. So I think that each step that we're making in the right direction still counts. And so at least from the autopsy initiative side, we are grateful that we've been able to serve the amount of families that we have been. We provided, and so while we're grateful that we could assist that subset of families, thank you. We know that these deaths and custody deaths and police-related deaths are occurring on a much wider scale. So I think that similar challenges that other social justice organizations have is that there's a lot of great people and organizations doing the work, but it's difficult to spread the word, I think, especially when we're talking about national impact. So that's a struggle that we've been encountering, is how do we share the work that we're doing. And so that's why we're trying to do more in-person networking events and trying to use our marketing, use our data, use our storytelling efforts. Another challenge, kind of as I mentioned, data, data is a huge problem in tracking in custody deaths to begin with. We've gone to several conferences, and a lot of researchers and data analysts have explained how we don't know how many people are dying in custody to begin with. So I think that there are challenges as to lack of data, and I think without the data, it's difficult to get those policy changes that we want. So those are things that we're trying to do and focus on this year specifically.
The cultural moments, like sometimes these things can serve as distractions. Because how many people do y'all know that are still talking about the battle, Drake, Kendrick, what side are you on? And when you look at everything that is going on, that moment is very distracting. And so how we overcome those things, sometimes we have to lean into culture or leverage it or partner with it to still get our message across. Because the reality is that, you know, civics, advocacy is not cool, air quotes. And so you have to find a way to be relatable, connect the dots. And so there is that. You also have issues when it comes to perfect being the enemy of good. What I mean is internally with our own team, a lot of us are like, you know, high performers, whatever. And sometimes we have to check one another because it's like you can't get so fixated on whatever this activation or this advocacy effort looking perfect. We just have to get there. We will, you know, we're going to be as prepared as we can be, you know, as we are faced with those obstacles. So the mindset piece of it, you also have, you know, a very divided country that we're in, obviously. So from an advocacy perspective, because we are a 501c3, we do have a C4 side. I don't work on that side for people. Basically, when you're 501c3, that's your nonprofit status, you have to work on issue-based legislation. So sometimes we're able to come to the table and find, like I said earlier, a version of a piece of legislation or a bill. Sometimes we're not, and we have to resort to things like litigation, which is basically taking people to court because they're not doing what we believe to be right and or in the best interest of the community. So it's a very complex issue. This is probably one of the harder questions I saw that y'all had. Because it's not easy, you know, advocacy is difficult, that's why I said it's not linear.
I think especially as someone like in college, sometimes I feel like I'm so unempowered, and I think a lot of things are changing around me that are not things that you guys support or I feel like I don't have a say in. So I think highlighting organizations like the ones that you guys are part of is so important because it helps me realize how much change can happen and how much power is within community. For our last question for the panel today is how do you try to balance immediate community needs with your long-term systematic change goals?
Our immediate goal is to try to provide a family with answers about their loved one has passed. When we think about what we would want long-term for the initiative, it would be for it to not exist. It would be for police-related deaths to stop occurring, for in-custody deaths to stop occurring. But I think that we are unfortunately a long ways from that occurring. And from our side, we've seen that until the deaths stop, there's going to always be a need for our initiative. And so when we think the cause of death as a natural cause, and then our pathologists realizing that they were strangled to death and had a bunch of wounds and injuries not reported. So when we see these discrepancies, even within this small subset of cases that we've done, the 105, it raises question and suspicion to all of the autopsies being done. So I think that when we're thinking about things that we'd like to see, we would like to see transparency within the autopsy process. We'd like to see a separation of sheriff coroner's office. There's bias inherently present if you have police investigating a police death and determining what the cause of death is. And then ultimately with long-term, we hope that the families are able to obtain a sense of justice after experiencing such tragedy.
There are autopsies that are reported wrong. I'm not surprised because, you know, like you stated in your answer, some of these police departments, these sheriff's departments are in touch with the forensic pathologists, and they're not independent of giving a final autopsy to these impacted families. So it's unfortunate that, you know, we have police departments and sheriff's departments still intertwine with the forensic science and the autopsies for these impacted families?
It's very much a product of our environment, at least from the advocacy perspective. We have, like I mentioned, my colleagues in DC, anything from a federal standpoint right now is long term. Even we talked about the bill, the George Floyd Justice and Policing Act, that's been around since 2020. Clearly that's more of a long term thing. But even within that, we have been able to go to specific states, specific municipalities to get versions of that bill, or at least certain things that are in that bill passed, by working directly with those cities, those police departments, those legislatures, etc. The Urban League is not just an advocacy organization, we are a service-based organization. So we have a housing department, so we're constantly balancing long-term and short-term to get the best for the community.
To piggyback on that, I think what I found personally is that a lot of Black individuals are, I wouldn't say financially illiterate, they just aren't financially knowledgeable about how to go through the process of putting money down on a home. Or
you have those that are leading currently and making change, but we also have our auxiliaries or volunteer groups for people being developed to lead in urban leagues or in the broader ecosystem for the future. So we also can't do it all. That's why partnership comes into play. Some of the services I've heard her speak about when it comes to the autopsies, we definitely don't do that. So, that's a partnership. We connect them to the urban leagues because that's not something we do. We can't do everything. So,
not everybody can do everything, but one person can do something. All of our organizations that are here today, whether it be the Know Your Rights Camp, Autopsy Initiative, or the National Urban League, OCCORD, Advancing Justice America, the Bridge Lab, we had OCCORD, we had the Department of Justice, and we also had the California Department of Justice. We had FAIR yesterday, OC Human Relations. These organizations that we're bringing to you all who are watching, these are organizations who have been doing the work in their communities. They're not just talking about it, they are doing it. And what we encourage you all to do is that in these next 4 years that we are witnessing the rise of extremism and the rise of hate and the rise of separatism, what we encourage you to do is to get into an organization, organize. Kwame Ture, he says, you can mobilize, but then you gotta organize. There's a difference between the both. And what I encourage all of you to do as you're watching this seminar, figure out how you're gonna organize throughout these next 4 years. And once you figure that out, then you mobilize. Mobilize your families, mobilize your friends, mobilize your colleagues, mobilize your college campuses, get into those clubs. If there's not a club, make one. And then we're gonna have to make sure we teach the next generation how to do it properly, and that's by action.